All right, boys. Well, we kind of got off on some other stuff there to start this one, but let's get this thing back on the rails and talk about the main subject for this episode, and that is teams who have had playoff expectations coming into this season and going into American Thanksgiving this weekend, of course. Are in trouble right now. And that stat that I mentioned right off the top that I teased is from Elliot Friedman, and I think that you guys have heard this one before. So his stat is, and this is why being in a good position early in the season at this point at U.S. Thanksgiving is so important, because you have a 15% chance. 15 to make the playoffs if you're 4 or more points out at U.S. Thanksgiving. Now that, four or more points out in, November, I mean, doesn't sound like a lot, but clearly the stat is there that it can really be detrimental to your season as an organization. So wanted to get that stat in there. Did you guys know about that?
I did hear that on,
Okay,
I want to say a couple weeks ago on the podcast, him and Jeff were talking about it.
Yeah.
I haven't heard it this year and I didn't know the number, but I've heard in the past, like,
the
odds are
It's
are
not
tough.
much. It's not much. Low odds for sure.
Anyway, I wanted to deliver something interesting for once, guys. So there you go.
You're doing
Anyway,
a great job,
we've got some teams to talk about. One obvious one, of course. But Case, we'll go to you first, and of course we have some honorable mentions. And want to say again, like, these are teams we're talking about that have some expectations and coming into the season. Still have those expectations right now, but their seasons have not gotten off to the start that they wanted to. Obviously, we're not going to mention like teams like San Jose and Chicago and teams like that. We were expecting those teams to not be very good. So anyway, with all that being said, Case, let's go to you first and get the ball rolling here on this one.
Yeah, I'm going to mention a team that's looking like they're in trouble at U.S. Thanksgiving, a team that I think we ranked third in the division in the preseason rankings. They had a fantastic preseason and an okay start, and now have fallen off, and that's the Minnesota Wild. They're 5-8-4. That puts them 13th in the West Conference. That's 14 points, which would be second last in the East, if you want to put that even harsher. 2-4-2 in November. Really struggled. Their last 4 games have been some tough losses, especially that overtime loss to Toronto and a shootout loss, but nonetheless losses. The team is 31st in the league for goals against average at 4 goals against per game. Their PK is dead last at 65.5%, and they're 18th with 3.12 goals for per game. That's not really how you predict the Minnesota Wild to play. We usually think of this team as a very strong defensive team with usually good goaltending. And, the forwards are a lot of two-way guys that get the job done. That's how I'd expect the Minnesota Wild to play. Well, that's not been the case. I think one of the main reasons for this team's struggles is goaltending, for sure. Marc-Andre Fleury is second last in goals save above expected, and Gustafsson is fourth last, and that's 9 games each played. Save percentage of .875 and .882 for Fleury and Gustafsson. Defense hasn't really helped them out. I know they've missed Spurgeon for significant time, and now Goligoski as well, but with Spurgeon out, they've struggled to find a partner for Middleton that works, and his analytics and his numbers have not looked good with the guys they've been trying to pair him up with. And then since Spurgeon's been back, they've lost 4 with him. So, it's not looking good back there. Merrill and Maramis together, that pair is in the basement in terms of analytics, and they've found significantly more ice time due to Spurgeon and Goligoski being out. The only pairing that's really working, and no surprise because this guy is so solid every single year, is Brodin and Brock Faber. But, it's not looked good team defense wise either. The depth of this lineup has really hurt them. The bottom 6, when you look at in terms of expected goals share has been abysmal. And the top six is, streaky at times. There are some pluses with this team, one being Zuccarello continues to be an ageless wonder. Another guy who's playing kind of better than expected is Marcus Johansson, as well as Boldy, but we expect that from him now. And the fact that they are sixth last in the league in the PDO stat, which is the luck stat, gives me a little bit of hope for them. But man, this team has been shockingly bad in my eyes.
The luck stat and, like you mentioned, the goaltending. That's why I'm not as concerned as most people are about the Wild, because their goaltending has just been so terrible when historically it's been pretty good. Philip Gustafsson has been a pretty good goalie over the last few years, and Marc-Andre Fleury is about league average at this point in his career.
But what I wonder there is Marc-Andre Fleury starting to age out, and is Gustafsson maybe a flash in the pan that had a great season last year and maybe an okay season before with the Senators?
I think Gustafsson's been good for the last couple of years. Like, even when he was in Ottawa, he had good numbers in a limited sample size. So I think I think over the last couple of years, it's safe to say that he's been one of the better goalies. I would say like top half of starting goalies, maybe even, top 20 or so, because we have to work in tandem goalies as well. So he's been up there. He's been pretty solid over the last couple of seasons. Fleury, though, you're right. Maybe there is more cause for concern there because he's getting older and he hasn't been great over the last few years anyways. But when you see goaltending being so bad on a team whose goaltending isn't traditionally that bad, and same goes for the other way around, when their goaltending is really good when it traditionally hasn't been, I seem to think that it might come back to the middle. I'm not saying that will necessarily happen with Minnesota, but there are some glaring and outlier statistics, goaltending being one of the major ones here, that just make me look at this team like maybe the sky isn't falling. I don't know. That was my initial observation anyway. What
makes me more scared about the team than, maybe they'll turn around because the goaltending is every other stat is so middle of the road. So that's been the case for the Minnesota Wild for a decade or more. But, this year we are expecting more. We are expecting, to be a top 3 team in the division. Well, it's certainly not working. And that's with other teams in the West struggling. So they're just joining the pack, and I guess they're playing with their competition or something.
Yeah. I have a number for you here, but before I give you this number that I think summarizes what's going on in Minnesota. Harper, are you okay? Are you still with us here? We've lost you a couple times, but
yeah, just having some issues with my mic here. You guys can hear me okay still? Okay, yeah. Good. Okay, it just, for whatever reason, it doesn't say that I'm connected to my Yeti mic, but if I'm coming through okay, then that's great. So.
Yeah, I mean,
anyway,
I see that it doesn't say you're connected, but it sounds all right. So I guess we'll see. I mean, whatever. It was your camera, though. We lost you on the camera.
No, I know. Well, I was trying to reconnect because I thought my mic was the issue and all of that. So
this should be just fun for me to edit after the fact. But Case, speaking of the Minnesota Wild, I had one number that I think summarizes exactly what's going on in Minnesota. You ready for this number?
Yeah.
$14,743,588 in dead cap buyout money that we all know exists, but I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough.
Well, that's something I have in my notes here that I haven't even got to yet. It's something that scares me more about this team is that what are they going to do to bring something in to kind of right the wrongs here? They're at 99% of the cap right now.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the dead cap is screwing them. And we've expected that to be the case for the last couple of years and the next few. So,
And you mentioned the defensive woes too. Obviously goaltending is a problem, but they're not defending how they used to. I wonder if they miss a player like Matt Dumba, who essentially they weren't able to pay this offseason, even though we only got $4 million in Arizona because of their cap issues. So everything for me comes back to that cap issue, and it's just not a great look. And Bill Guerin coming out in the media and saying, we have dead money and it's hard to be competitive, but we've got some good players anyways, and like we're really hoping to push for a playoff spot. It's like, Bill, you bought these guys out. Like, you know, like what do you like? You can't complain about it.
Just imagine what you could do with 14 million when you're trying to get a good centerman and a defenseman.
They might almost be able to afford Willie Nylander for that much. 14 million.
Oh, geez. Yeah, well, finally able to jump in on the Wild talk here, guys. Obviously, a good team to choose for this. And look, they're not getting the goaltending. Philip Gustafsson could have been a Vezina nominee last year. He was that good, and obviously Fleury's best days are behind him. You've got Wallstead, who's coming, recently called up from Iowa. But while I admire Bill Guerin and for what he's done to shake up the roster, clearly it wasn't working with Suter and Parise at those high cap hits. But
trade him. Attach a pick and trade him. Don't care. That's so lazy. No,
fair enough. And we've said that before, that buyouts can certainly be a lazy way to get rid of a guy and shake up your team. But regardless, I do admire Billy G for thinking like, okay, we, regardless of these guys and the deals they have and the commitments long term here, we got to get them out. It's not working. But look, I mean, this team still doesn't have a number one center. You hope that one day that's going to be Marco Rossi, who has certainly taken some strides, but you don't have that. You have some glaring holes on the back end, especially with some players that I think they'd like to move on from, John Merrill and a few other guys. So it's just that they're not as deep. We knew that it would be a little bit bleak here in Minnesota for a couple of years, but with that dead money, but I thought they'd be a lot better than this to start the season.